And there's one thing I want to talk about further with regards to the biometrics issue. And this is what really brought me to this issue and why I wanted to talk to you about it. So I read your interview with Start Page, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this issue. I think it's probably one of the most important ones and the one I never considered. So obviously we're in this period of an awakening with regards to race in America. All the historical inequities that have underpinned our system since the start are being called out. And, we're really trying to actively address issues that impact life in the Black community and other communities of color. I've been engaged with a lot of DEI efforts at my company and with a nonprofit that I work with, and really trying to be honest with myself and kind of look back at how I was raised and how I grew up and how that impacts who I am now. And when I was reading that article, I never thought I would bridge that effort with kind of technology and what I do in the space. But you talk about how biometrics kind of impact people of color differently in a negative way. What are the implications for these differences and what are they? How does that happen?
So, this is interesting. And I feel bad that I can't remember the woman's name. So the woman the Black woman who was the AI researcher that was terminated from Google recently, she had done some very groundbreaking work on bias in facial recognition. And one of the things, it's not a long paper. I highly recommend you go check it out. But she was saying how the certain facial recognition programs, they use like a 6-point or 5-point color chart of how the technology will sort of read the faces of people. And these color charts were very similar and they are very narrow. So if I go right now, let's say Rihanna's makeup line, so she has all colors in the spectrum, right, of different people in different shades. That's like 40 or 50 shades. And so this particular thing that is used with a lot of facial recognition software is only 5 shades and they're very similar. Wow. So because of that, a lot of the facial recognition software, and because there are so few people of color that are actually involved in this testing, they tend to recognize Black people or Black women, especially, an error rate of 10 times that of a white male. So,
sure,
it's just not made for that. And so some of the other implications of that, say there are, and this goes back to medical, right? So there are medical technologies that are using facial recognition to diagnose things like skin cancer. So if you have a device that is reading a person of color and is using these narrow spectrums, it may give you a false result. It may say, well, you don't have skin cancer because the machine says you don't or whatever, but is the machine accurate? Is it reading your face correctly? And that may cause medical harms to someone who may end up in a later stage of cancer because this device that was supposed to work so well doesn't. So I think there needs to be more truth in understanding what facial recognition can and can't do, like what are the downsides of it. And then I think the problem is a lot of times because facial recognition really isn't regulated. So someone's selling a product and say, oh, this is perfect. It works really well. We think it's awesome or whatever. But that may not be the case for different people who are being put through these facial recognition programs. And, as we've seen, that there are a couple cases where guys were arrested. So they were arrested because they said that their picture matched this. They did a search on like a DMV database and they thought these people looked like a suspect. And this one guy, the police arrested him and they even admitted that he didn't look like the photo, right? So the judge, they took him in front of the judge. The judge said, this is clearly not the same person. It's like what is wrong with your eyeballs, basically? But so he was eventually released. But I mean, can you imagine that you got arrested for a crime and you have to rely on the mercy of someone to say that you don't look like this photograph? For some of these facial recognition programs they are selling, they may say we have a 30% error rate. Well, so does that mean 30 people go to jail?
Yeah, I mean, especially too, when you combine witness bias with limitations of technology, and then you have the lack of oversight over how those tools might be deployed by law enforcement agencies. That's just insane of the problems that could emerge from that. Do you know of any efforts? I mean, it seems like, so is the solution to not only maybe limit the way that certain profiling tools or certain biometrics are used in those types of circumstances, but also to up the technology to change it to account for the near limitless spectrum of color there is across races?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it has to be both. So I think it has to be improving the technology, because the technology isn't going to go away. But then also, I don't think it should be used in a situation that could cause permanent harm to an individual, right? So maybe it can be used in sort of lower stakes situations, where they may perform better in that way. And then also, I always say, this is funny. So when I look at movies, I like to watch movies about technology, and it's crazy to me. I didn't understand why almost all movies about technology had like the evil robot, because robots did all these bad things or whatever.
Sure.
But a lot of it is mentally, psychologically an abdication of responsibility from humans, right? So a human should make the final judgment. Even an algorithm can't be ethical, because ethics is about humans and it's about judgment, right? So all they're doing is making a decision, yes or no. But we as humans need to be the ones to say, this is right and this is wrong. And that's where I feel like we've gotten things wrong about this, because we're thinking of it like a TV show or something, like a movie where the computer is all knowing and it knows everything. And it tells you, you don't know anything because it tells you all this other type of stuff. So it's like I guess to me, it's almost like the example of GPS. So I remember I used to have to read maps. You go into the drugstore, you get a map and you read it and figure out how to get where you're going to go. And like now with GPS, most people don't even know how to get around. Like if the GPS told them to run into the lake, they would do it, because they were like, oh, I don't know, or whatever.
When you said go to the store and buy a map, you just lost about half the audience.
I'm dating myself. Yeah. You're like, maps and stores.
Yeah, but it is really interesting to think about that and how technology is portrayed, whether you're talking about the singularity or you're talking about, a computer like HAL, all the way up through movies and TV today into series like The Black Mirror, where it's all about crazy technology and privacy loss and things like that. But the issue of race, biometrics, law enforcement, and society, I think, is an extremely interesting topic. I love to talk about that more with you at some point. B, I would love to know if there's any opportunities or programs going on that are designed to try and change that. Like we said, about update that technology or even regulate it. Because that, if there's one area of technology that should be heavily regulated, it's that.
Oh, absolutely.
And also too, I'd like to find that piece that you mentioned of the Google engineer. Maybe we can put that in the links under the resources on the page here. But